Right, it is 4 minutes past one. So, in the interest of time, we'll accommodate latecomers as they come in. But thank you for making the time. I'm Tom Aber. I'm director of the Digital Cultures Research Centre. This is the latest in our regular series of DCRC sharing seminars, where we invite DCRC members to share work in progress, ideas, proposals, big projects, small projects. It will be my very great pleasure to introduce Judith Aston in a moment, but consider that bit done. But just to flag two things. One, we are recording this, so if anyone wants to copy the recording, it will be up on YouTube in a few days' time, and also there will be a space for Q&A at the end. Feel free to drop questions in the chat in the meantime, but we will manage that sort of when Judith has finished her presentation. But I will hand over to Judith Aston and say thank you very much and leave you all in her capable hands.
Thank you, Tom. So, hello, everybody. I'm dialing in from Bower Ashton. So, I know quite a few people from across our college had signed up to this. So, I'm going to divide my talk into three parts. The first part, I'm going to talk a bit about the provenance of the project and what led me to Avonmouth. Then I'm going to show the project and give you a good dive into how it works and what its principles are. And then I'm going to kind of talk about where we've got to it, addressing some of the questions I've put in the abstract for my talk about what it takes to use the methods well, how do you build trust, etc., etc., and just tell you where we've got to because it's an ongoing project, and then open up for questions. So I'm going to start with a PowerPoint. And yeah, I'm in the film department down at Bower Ashton, and I work with kind of expanded film methods. So let's go to the PowerPoint and to slideshow. All right, continue to share. Okay, can you all see that? Full
Yeah.
screen? Yeah. So just really briefly, this is my PhD title, and that goes back to the early 2000s and my work in the very fledgling interactive multimedia industry, working with the BBC interactive television at a time when all this was very new, using computers to tell stories and create non-linear routes through database narratives to tell multiple stories with multiple storylines and multiple entry points. So I did a PhD on that at the Royal College of Art with my main advisor was from the social anthropology department in Cambridge, someone called Alan McFarlane, who pioneered using this technology. So from the start, I've got a background in geography, and then I went into media, working in this fledgling industry. And then I went to the Royal College of Art to study for a PhD in visual anthropology and interaction design. So I cut across social science, geography, anthropology, media production, and now I'm collaborating with colleagues across Kate around just transition. So it all goes back to Ted Nelson, who was a kind of early pioneer of the internet, who had this vision for what the internet could be and the idea of interconnectedness and everything being deeply intertwingled. And that's a kind of idea, of databases that connect things up. And the idea of breaking down binaries, breaking out of linear narratives, breaking out of standard kind of hero's journey, 3-act narratives. I work in the film department, so I've been teaching this stuff alongside my research for a long time. But look him up, Ted Nelson, a real pioneer that's inspired my thinking all the way through, really. And so in the early days, when I was doing my PhD, I was working with an anthropologist from Oxford who'd spent a lot of time in the Sudan since the 60s, been doing intermittent fieldwork. She had a huge archive of mixed media materials. And I worked with her to look at ways to narrate her archive and to use multimedia to communicate ideas and arguments. So, and then I was juxtaposing using multiple windows, and these are video clips telling different aspects about displacement and her work in the Sudan. So I've always been interested in the multiple windows, multiple storylines, multiple entry points. And then in 2008, I was already at UE by then, a project came along in the industry called Gaza Sederot, which came out of Arte in France, which was about in times, it's very poignant now, in times of war, please can we talk about peace? And the guy who made it with several producers on the ground across Israel and Palestine, really wanted to show everyday life and multiple perspectives. And so it was an industry project that was doing the same stuff that I was doing for my PhD, and multiple voices, and kind of narrating stories across divides. So that really inspired me, and I thought, well, there's something going on here in the industry. So it led me to think about setting up iDocs, which Mandy has been very involved with as well, and a colleague called Sandra Gaudenzi in London. And we together have convened several international symposia where we brought together academics around the world, key people in the industry, people working in community contexts, and we had several international symposia at the Watershed starting in 2011. And it started off thinking about interactive documentary, this kind of web-based, non-linear, multiple windows idea. And then that led to Sandra and I writing a publication in 2012 called Interactive Documentary Setting the Field, which kind of laid down some markers for this specific idea of interactive documentary. And then it led to Sandra, Mandy, and I think it was 2017, publishing, co-editing a book together on the evolving practices of interactive documentary. Again, these are widely kind of cited and known in the field. So I'm thinking about impact at the moment. So this is the underlying research behind the work I'm doing in Avonmouth. And then in 2018, I convened a panel. So we had iDocs Symposium became biannual, and at the 2018 panel, I convened a symposium. I convened a panel with my colleague Stefano Odorico, who was at York at the time, on the poetics and politics of polyphony. And we subsequently edited a special issue of Alphaville on that with various of our colleagues who'd presented in the panel and wider people who had an interest, working in this field. So that's there. It's available online. It's open access. And then in 2021, we convened an online community conversation. So that's myself and Stefano, and that was Sandra who was hosting it for us. And we'd moved from with iDocs. We had a 2020 iDocs all planned. Mandy knows this, the amount of work that went into it, and then along came COVID, and we ended up having to cancel it. But we were already thinking about a more distributed model, climate aware, rather than bringing everybody to Bristol, or the carbon footprint and just the kind of centeredness of always having it in Bristol. So we had plans to decenter, but since that happened, we haven't had another symposium, but we've had a series of community conversations. So this one was on iDocs and multi-perspectival thinking. Again, iDocs has expanded now to include immersive media, and a lot of, the documentary world and the relationship with technology is constantly evolving. But I had a core interest, and it was still unfinished business for me. So I wanted to kind of drill into that, which is what I've done with the polyphonic documentary project that I'm going to tell you about in a minute, and the work in Avonmouth. So we convened this community conversation. Out of that, we then launched a project called the Polyphonic Documentary Project, Stefano and I. I don't know why it's doing this little fancy thing, but there we are, convened by. So that's us. Stefano is now in Ireland at the Technological University of the Shannon, and we're still working together. So that project, and this is the underlying ethos behind everything really, is again exploring this idea of multiple voices, multiple perspectives, and the computer multiple windows interfaces towards creating dialogism rather than monologism, So again, I have a particular thing about narrative working in a film department, where I was sensing that film commissioning was becoming more standardized, and there was a lot more freedom back in the 70s and the 80s, when Channel 4 was set up, and commissioning was becoming quite constrained and quite straitjacketed. So in response to that, I was thinking, well, dialoguism and using documentary to promote dialogue rather to tell single authored stories is really important, and to think about narrative structure beyond the kind of standard structures that we see perhaps in Hollywood narratives that feed through into television. So it's all about dialogue and using documentary to promote dialogue rather than to create a single authored story from a director. Inspired by Bakhtin, the idea truth is born, nor is not born, nor is it to be found inside the head of an individual person. It's born between people collectively searching for truth in the process of their dialogic interaction. So it's about co-creation, it's about utterances. So he wrote about the polyphonic novel, and it's about how heteroglossia is the term he uses, and how voices in the polyphonic novel could retain some of their own cadence, their own utterance, and they could be in dialogue with the author. So it was kind of novel of ideas that promote dialogue, that didn't provide a story with a beginning, middle, and end, and a narrative arc leading to catharsis. So just a different way of thinking about filmmaking that's close to what I'm interested in. So the project's objectives was to co-create a model for new approaches to polyphonic documentary. So I see polyphonic documentary as being a subset of iDocs, if you like. We were testing out ideas with colleagues from around the world, and we were creating a community of makers with a theoretical underpinning and a practical approach. We set up a website, and that's polyphonicdocumentary.com, and there's a blog and lots of material on there. We did collective reading. So this was in the time of lockdown, so it was quite handy because we were able to convene people from our iDocs community literally from all around the world, Australia, Turkey, Canada, France, India, from all over. And we met online and we did collective reading. We were sharing our projects and practices, and then we did some collective projects together using tools. And at the time, pioneer of a piece of software called Korsakoff was doing a PhD with me. And so we worked with his tool, and stornoway.io, which is a local startup in Bristol, which has created a really good tool for creating interactive narrative that now is the world's most popular interactive authoring tool. We worked with Rue. We knew him through iDocs, and so we were working, collaborating with developers as they were developing their software. So that's an example. Lots of faces from around the place, Portugal, Turkey, Australia. So at any one time, there was about 100 people in the community, and at any one time, there's about 30 people working on a specific project. So we put out a call. We asked people to send short clips, not edited, most of them taken on the mobile phone, not overthought. But the first one was, what does polyphony mean to you? People sent in 3 short clips of no longer than a minute. We put them in a big pot, and then we experimented with them and made some interactive work. And out of that, we came up with a model for polyphonic documentary using interactive media, based on Bakhtin's ideas about carnival. So mutable space and time, creating spaces where, again, this is an ideal because you always have hierarchies and there's always power imbalances, but trying to create a space where everybody had a voice and people could work together and break down hierarchies. Again, impossible to do completely, but as an ideal, that's what we were aiming for. And then thinking about multiplicity and heteroglossia, again, Bakhtin's term, complexity, dialogue, collaboration, co-creation, not having edited footage, not using film and adding sound and adding all those techniques to manipulate and to draw people through a narrative, but to have raw clips that had a different form of authenticity. And then thinking about the aesthetics that you could get with that, leading to relational thinking and felt experience and experience of everyday life, and thinking about narrative and the everyday rather than narrative as extreme storytelling, violence, gunfights, gangs, high drama. So thinking about what if we were to focus more on the everyday, where would that take us? So this is the project that's come out of this for me. So we got to a point where we were making projects together, we were thinking together, and we thought, well, the next step is to do projects, go back to the local, because this was an international group, do projects in our own locality, think about the relevance of these to more local community contexts. So Stefano has been doing a project in Ireland. We've been busy doing these projects, so we need to reconvene the polyphonic documentary project and start getting them out there with our colleagues around the world, sharing ideas and looking at what other people are doing. I just reviewed, well, no, I'm not allowed to say that, am I? But I reviewed a big project for a colleague in Canada for funding that's very exciting. So we've got colleagues around the world who are working with this area, and indeed Mandy, her work with Video Nation, and there's a lot of shared values and interests around this that we're keen to share with that community. But we've been busy doing the project and working. I've been busy in the local community. So this is Avonmouth. This is the project, and that's the main interface. I'm going to take you into it in a minute, but it uses that same principle of multiple windows. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to take you into the project and tell you about how this is being applied into a project on just transition. So that's that bit. So I will share again. It's time online. And I need to check the sound, make sure it's sharing. Yeah, it says it's on. So that should work. So, okay. So here we are. Avonmouth is up the Avon River on the where the river joins the Severn Estuary. It's a village of about 6,000 people that grew up around the port of Bristol, but its surrounding area is one of the largest brownfield sites in Europe now, and the port has gone from being, really heavy industry, a lot of coal, a lot of oil, a lot of kind of chemical factories, a lot of very heavy industry. It's changed now, and it's much more about distribution warehouses, the Asdas and the Tesco's of this world, and also about green energy production. So that's where Just Transition comes, because Avonmouth and its surrounding area is a kind of real hotspot for the transition to net zero. But the perception of it in Bristol is, people of Avonmouth feel kind of forgotten and ignored, and people say, oh, you don't want to go to Avonmouth, that's a horrible place, and actually they've got a strong community. And also people don't know quite how much that community is taking for the rest of Bristol and beyond in terms of the transition to these new industries. So that, it's a growth area, there's a lot of new industry, it's green, but there's still, pollution, there's still the water sewage, it takes a lot of the sewage, it takes a lot of our waste, there's a lot of waste management companies, there's incinerators, there's a big project to turn the energy that comes from the incinerators and into carbon capture. So, and there's a lot going on, and the port are also doing a lot around wind turbines. And so it's a real hotspot, a really kind of interesting area, but nobody really knows that people live there. So I went into the community centre and started working with the community. So here is the main interface for the project. And it's got three main routes. So you can find your way, which is kind of about the project and navigation. You can meet the people, and you can enter the conversation. So just briefly, we go into Find Your Way. There's stuff about the project, stuff about the place, and stuff about the interface. So the place, this is the text heavy bit. The rest is really not text heavy at all. So it just talks about Avonmouth, where it is, positions it on the estuary. It's just a little thing. The project talks about who we are, what we're doing, what our research process is. And this is where it's a very collaborative project. So I'm the project lead, and I'm, as a visual anthropologist, I'm the ethnographer. I'm the person who's been in and been doing field work. And it's through the field work and through the establishment of trust and through that ongoing field work that this project, it's come out of that. But I have been working with a filmmaker and interactive designer, Karen Boswell, who's got 30 years of experience of working in film, working a lot in Mozambique, really interested in non-linear narrative, worked a lot with us on the polyphonic documentary project. Rengin, who's here, she is a PhD student of mine who found me due to a shared interest in interactive media. So she's comes out of design, but has been working across and learning filmmaking. So she worked on the project with us. It's now a case study for her PhD. Abby Tabor is, she's in the health department at UWE, and the project started as AHRC impact collaboration between myself. Well, it didn't start. That's how the funding came to actually make it after the fieldwork around what it takes to build a healthy community in a place like Avonmouth. And then there's Bharat, who's another of my PhD students doing work in India around interactive documentary, who contributed. So we were an interdisciplinary team. So there we are. But we very much were collaborating with the Avonmouth Community Centre initially, and now we've extended that out to collaborate with 7net, which is the organisation that's trying to bring together business and community and advocating for this area as a growth area, but also an area that could be a real exemplar for just transition. And Lara DeVito, who's in up at French, I don't remember which department now, but I'm collaborating with her now on the second round of AHRC funding to take this project into the business community. So we started off very much doing it within the residential community and surrounding businesses that were committed to giving something back to the community. And now we're extending it out into the wider business networks for impact and to create dialogue, because there's a real strong need for dialogue between business and community. And we're also extending it out to the whole environmental voices, because the whole area, if you didn't have people there, would be one of the best places for carbon capture, knowing because it would be salt marshes, and blue carbon is fantastic for carbon capture. So, and it's a very important site for migratory birds, for salt marshes, all sorts of things. So you've got these tensions between community, business, and environment. And this project is kind of navigating that and trying to find a way through it, and through dialogue. So that's what we are doing. And I started off saying, let's co-create, to Rachel, let's do this. We are doing it together. But when I started talking to the community, they were saying, well, we don't want to co-create. We're happy for you to kind of make a project and show us what this is all about, and for you to do that work. But we've got lots of stories. We've got lots of things we'd like to tell you. So we ended up authoring this piece and then taking it back into the community. And now we've taken it to the business community, and now we're thinking about next steps and how this will be a catalyst for promoting and helping with the dialogue that's really needed, what we might do next. And it might become a multi-platform project. This might be one piece of a larger jigsaw. This is all to be decided as we continue the conversations with the community centre, with 7net and other stakeholders. So what we've got so far is we did 18 interviews in the community centre and around about. with a cross-section of people representing that community. And we've got migrant workers, we've got long-standing residents, we've got Kate from 7net, we've got Emma, who runs the food bank, we've got Chris, who's a resident but really active on the community planning group. Iggy is a new resident, young, just had a baby. Pastor Adeba runs the Nigerian church. The Nigerian community is the fastest growing community in Avonmouth. Rachel is calls herself the CEO now of the Avonmouth Community Centre, but yeah, does a lot of work, bringing community together. Mark is a very strong family business of hygiene that helps out with the community centre. So they're giving something back. So we wanted to highlight in this first piece, where business is giving something back, to try and encourage other businesses to take more of an engaged interest in community. And then we've got some more residents. We've got Deria, who has been living in Avonmouth for about 12 years now. She's part of the Turkish community. And what was wonderful about this was Rengin being Turkish. It turned out that she comes from the same village or nearby to where Rengin comes from. So they immediately hit it off. And so that kind of intersectionality, both within the project team making the piece and then crossing over into the exchanges and the relationships we built in the community, was a really beautiful thing. So, and then we have Faye, who's the pastor's wife. And then we've got John Chaplin, and he's a bigwig. He's one of the directors of the port, a director of external affairs. So he's responsible both for local community liaison, but also he's running all the big projects such as carbon capture and the wind turbines. But he's worked there for 18 years, and he's a Methodist, comes from a Methodist family, as is Rachel from the community centre. And there is a connection there. And so, yeah, he does support the community, which is good. And then there's Luke from Incredible Edible, who's now doing amazing things in the community centre around gardening and wildlife. He's creating this really magical community garden. So there's the characters, and each one of those, there's a short clip to introduce them. But I'm going to go into the actual project. So the project is divided into 3 sections, and it's all kind of based on short video clips based on our ethnographic interviews. So the interviews were about an hour long. We then thematically analysed them all, and this was using the AHRC impact budget. And Rengin, with it being a part of her PhD, incredibly lucky to have her time as well. So she and Karen did a lot of that, kind of thematically analysing, because with these impact projects, the project lead doesn't get the time. So it's been brilliant to be able to work with a team. So we thematically analysed all these clips, took short clips of a maximum of a minute each that were compelling content, divided them into themes, and then divided them into sections. So the first section is living in Avonmouth, which is about everyday life in Avonmouth. And we've embedded the clips alongside images of place. I'll show you how that works in a minute. Then making a difference. This is about transition and just transition, and it's about foresight thinking. It's about moving through levels to people who are making a difference in the here and now, trying to change things, and then looking ahead is the bigger visions. So we've got a fairly wacky interface, and we're using this in workshop settings and in live screening settings. This at the moment isn't a standalone link that you watch online on your own. And that's one of the issues that I'll come to about what it takes to use these methods well. But just quickly showing you. So living in Avonmouth, there's 6 different sections across different themes. We hope the themes will come through. You don't need to know what they are, because they are kind of clustered thematically just by their organisation. So you go into one of these, and then you've got 6 short clips. So if we start with this one.
There was one time when a lot of people didn't even know that people lived in Avonmouth. They thought it was just an industrial place. I can remember when they were going to build this flyover, and we had the doctors come down to say about the children, affecting the children with the fumes. And someone from the council stood up and said, well, where do these children come from? And we said, well, they live here. And they didn't realise that people actually lived here. They thought it was just an industrial area.
So this is the kind of the community speaking back. And what I went to with Darren Jones, who's the local MP, you know, now he's stellar up in the Labour government, but he did a series of community conversations. And he came to Avonmouth and he said to me afterwards, he said, oh, this is the most feisty vocal group. He said, every time we come here, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of complaining, there's a lot of frustration, and it's hard to move forwards. So the idea is that this is more of a breathing space that allows people to speak and allows different voices to come through, and perhaps presents things in a better light as an opener for dialogue. So that's the power of this.
Special. In some ways, I feel it's like a well-kept secret in some ways. I think people don't think about it when you say Bristol, even though obviously it's in the county, it's a stone throw away from Bristol.
So it's a place-making project. So it's about redefining Avonmouth, and this is the geographer in me. It's about core and periphery, and what happens if you flip that, and instead of Bristol city centre being the core and Avonmouth being the periphery, you know, over there up the railway, end of the line, nobody goes there. What if you make Avonmouth the core, and what ripples out of Avonmouth? So this project very firmly starts with community, then it ripples out to the wider businesses around the area, then it ripples out to the wider city, and then it ripples out beyond there. And I'll talk about that in a minute, because we're doing some work with Alan MacLeod, civic engagement, looking at the application of these ideas and this way of working to other contexts around the country and beyond. But the idea here is you've got these strange, you get used to them, but these are ideas, they're carousels, and if you go left, right,
and
so there's this huddle of life
on a theme,
surrounded by really key, massive players in industry, particularly around the environment. And if you put it into the thoughts, the hydrogen, nuclear, electricity, waste.
Okay, so they're all short clips, and then
all that.
We're a small village, meaning that we haven't got.
So we do get sort of tarred as being an industrial estate. We also get the blame in a lot of or it feels as though we do quite often, if there's any problems with smells, odours, dust, anything nasty. Most of the journalists and reporters seem to say, or people put up, well, it's coming from Avonmouth, and it isn't. It's not necessarily coming from Avonmouth. And what people don't seem to realise is that, yeah, we've got all the industrial estates down here, but it's the whole of Bristol that create all the stuff that comes through Avonmouth. So it's not us creating it.
Okay, so you can see what we're doing is we're recentering, and we're saying what ripples out of Avonmouth.
It's them.
Avonmouth is a Victorian working class village.
So you get the idea, but the idea is you've got 6 that way, but then you can go up this way.
Last year, we had a guy who had his ship had docked, and he had.
We are surrounded.
Okay. And giving you a
historically,
sense. So here's the
much of Avonmouth village was inhabited by those engaged either by the port or by the large manufacturing activities that took place in the local area, included, for example, BZL, RTZ, Roan Pulenk, ICI, etc. Modernisation has changed that. We're no longer providing those manufacturing facilities.
So I'm going to cut him, but he goes on to say that he would like to think that as the businesses are changing, he said his concern is that the new businesses don't really care where they get their labour from, whereas the port, you know, because they work round the clock, and when ships came in, they needed to be able to draw on a local labour force. They had a very, very strong relationship with the local community, but now that their business has changed, they're doing a lot of distribution, and there's not the same connection with the community. And so he's speaking on behalf of the community and saying, I hope that the businesses, will understand the importance of community and the importance of everybody, creating a sense of place and a sense of pride around transition to net zero that is just. I mean, obviously he's the director of the port, but this is polyphony and this is different perspectives, and being able to hear and meet people and see those different perspectives. So we
moved into the house I'm in now in 1980.
It has been quite a negative.
My husband died with
No, nature is very, very important. Natural nature created by God. And when you look at this environment now, it's nature. It is not a building that is created, but it's natural nature. Even the breeze, everything, it comes directly onto you.
So you're getting all these kind of different voices, and it's interesting, so he's recently moved from Nigeria, and for him, people say, oh, Avonmouth's really dirty, it's filthy, it's, you don't want to go there. For him, he's kind of saying this place is amazing, it's safe, it's a lot safer than Nigeria. So you get these kind of shifting perspectives, and you're exploring it and just kind of getting this polyphony of voices, but in a curated way that. So you've got living in Avonmouth, then if you go up a layer, you've then got making a difference. And these are just straight voices about people making a difference. I haven't got time to show you clips, but, Mark says, it's really important to us to be contributing to the community. Luke talks about his vision for nature and how important nature is, and community growing, and how Avonmouth's a food desert and how he's growing and taking food to the community centre. And then they cook communal meals together, and it's community centres, a welcoming space for all. Emma talks about the food bank. So you've got people making a difference, and then you go up a layer, and then you've got people talking about visions for the future. So there you've got Kate talking about 7net and how it's really important. Avonmouth traditionally sees itself as part of Bristol. It is part of Bristol, but it's also part of the Severn Estuary. So Kate is really interested in shifting perspectives so that people think of themselves as an estuary community, as a coastal community. So she talks about Portbury, Avonmouth and Sevenside in every sentence, because she's place building, creating an area, that connects with WECA. We're involved with the Western Combined Authority that are doing placemaking that cuts across Somerset, Bristol and Gloucester. So this is about the multiple, and the idea of having this is that you don't have to have one identity. You don't have to lose your identity with Bristol to also take on an identity with the estuary. And we're kind of trying to shift things through this project. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to just very, very quickly show you a final few slides, and then open it up to questions. So we can get rid of that. And then, where are we? Zoom. I need to go out, exit full screen. Zoom. We go to, share. Right, I need to open this. Okay, there it is. Yeah. Okay, so what we've done so far is we started off screening this in the community centre, and we invited all the participants and their friends, and it was a brilliant event. Rachel said it was the most intersectional event she'd had since she'd been there. It's quite hard to bring the community together. She's working really hard to do it, but this made a real contribution. So we screened it in the community centre, and there were, you can see the elderly residents at the front, there were council workers, there were community liaison officers, people from the Nigerian church. They're not there yet, but they arrived all in the finery. A whole load of them arrived. So we did the screening, and this is my favourite shot at the front there. The lady who's really smiling is Elsie. She's one of the people who feels forgotten. Council's trying to move her out. She really doesn't want to move out. And just seeing her look on her face and talking to them afterwards, how thrilled they were that there was such an interest across the community in this project and in what they had to say in it was a total delight. So then we had a conversation afterwards and we got some feedback. Then we normally in just transition, you would say bring everybody together and just kickstart the dialogue, but there's a long way to go to build that dialogue. So we started with the community. We then did a separate workshop for the business community last October. So we did that in the community centre. So this was more sitting round tables and you can see the post-it notes. So again, we showed the piece and we showed it in a different way from the way we showed it in the community centre. And that's one of the powers of this, that you can curate it. And because it's non-linear, you can show different clips and then you can ask different sets of questions. So everybody had questions to ask. And what was thrilling here was to see how showing the documentary really kick-started dialogue. And you've got business and Rachel, you know, people from the community. There were some community members there, but we couldn't stop them talking. We wanted to do the plenary, but this really, really did create a really strong, powerful dialogue. And community centre and 7net weren't particularly close, and you know, they weren't. 7net had kind of given up a bit on Avonmouth. They said, oh, they're always complaining. But because our contribution by convening these spaces for what do I call it, generative listening, you know, by convening a workshop, by convening environment, by showing documentary in these settings, we managed to create a space that really did open up the dialogue. And now 7net and the community centre are working much more closely. 7net were, you know, a bit suspicious of who we were at the time, but now we're really embedded within 7net, and I'm on the West of England industrial cluster. I go to their monthly meetings, so we're now collaborating very much across the community and 7net and the business networks. And the port, John Chapman from the port is a real supporter too. So there you are, you know, having a really good conversation. Then we did, with our partners in the industry, Stornoway, we did a higher education summit. That's recorded, so you could look that up and you could find a recording where I'm talking about the project. There's a Q&A, and Stefano's talking about the project he's doing in Ireland. We've written about it on our blog site, and then Yui has written about it, the wider collaboration now that we're doing around just transition. Laura DeVito has done a lot of work with 7net, with the business community. She did evaluation for them on their decarbonisation project. So we're looking at foresight, using these methods to bring community business environment into future-facing dialogue, how you shift the conversation away from the everyday and the everyday frustrations into the bigger visions, and how you bring everybody along with you in a way that's just. And then we're working with Alan MacLeod. This is LPIP, which is, he's an LPIP fellow. So we've got some more money to make a toolkit to look at the wider application of these tools, initially in Britain across different councils. So we're going to be talking to Durham about their experience of net zero and the negative press that it gets. And, you know, there's, as we know, there's a lot of dissent and there's not much consensus, and we're in quite troubling times where we do need dialogue and we do need to bring people together, because the political environment's getting quite edgy, shall we say. So that's it. I will stop sharing and just have that provocation that for me, it's really, trust is really key to this. And so for me, this is an arts-based method working across into other disciplines, but it's also very much grounded in my background, you know, in visual anthropology. And I'm working now with Sarah Pink, who is a kind of futures anthropologist, really well known globally. She's now a visiting professor at UE, which is fantastic. And we're working together on research bids and taking these ideas out into the international arena, but absolutely remaining with our feet firmly on the ground in community. So I will stop there and ask what questions people might have, or comments or thoughts, or thinking about wider application. I mean, for me, this is something it's a proof of concept for something I've been thinking about for a long time, ever since that work, my PhD in Gaza Sederot. And I just want to see this in the mix of tools and possibilities. Everybody said, oh, interactive documentary is dead because there wasn't a business model for it. But I think we found an application where it's being really useful. So that's really rewarding. But there's still a lot to do.
Judith, thank you. I'm going to say, are there any questions from the floor? But can I jump in as director with one first one? And you kind of answered it already in terms of, and it's an impact related question, in terms of where you take this next. So obviously you built up a really close working relationship with the residents of Avonmouth and kind of the policy around that and kind of local governance. How are you finding working with, or even just beginning to work with different organisations?
It requires time, and it's taken time to build trust. I mean, for me, I felt a deep connection with the community centre and with Rachel, and she's Methodist, John from the Porters, and my mum was a Methodist, and we kind of bonded, So my feet were very firmly in the community centre, and it's taken quite a lot for me to kind of extend out and start talking to the wider community. And I was kind of aligned with the residents, feeling very lost and forgotten. But now, as I've built relationships up over time, and I've been going to the business breakfasts they have business breakfasts once a month. I've been going to those regularly. And at the last one, Helen Goodwin, the mayor, came, and so everybody was in the room, all the big movers and shakers. And there's a woman called Ree who was running the industrial cluster. And I get on really, she's great, and actually Kate comes from the transition movement. And there's real vision in 7net, and there's a real desire, there's a real commitment to circular economy, and there's some really great people. So you just have to kind of step out of your own comfort zone and put yourself, put your money where your mouth is. I talk about polyphony, so I have to do it. But it's challenging. And 7net want, there's the community would like more history stuff. 7net want younger voices. There's a lot of work around skills. So there's lots of ways this project could go. And talking to Alan MacLeod about it, there's the big project we want to do, the research project around just transition and environment, and methods for making foresight more meaningful. But then there's also smaller projects in the here and now, the pragmatic ones of helping to improve dialogue between business and community in the here and now. But you have to, be careful not to get appropriated, and to, Rachel said to me when Helen Godwin and when our project was flagged up as something that 7net were really keen to support, Rachel said, don't forget where this project came from. It came from community. And I said, I'll never forget, Rachel. And I'm still very committed to that. But we'll see.
Thanks.
Polyphony's not easy.
No, Judith, can you see the chat? Or do you want me to read out? There's
Yes.
a question from Paul.
Yes. Yeah. Paul Matthews.
Paul Matthews, yeah.
Yeah. So Paul and I worked. John Dovey gave us some money he collaborated with me with my work with Wendy James back in the day. So lovely to see you, Paul. What were the problems with putting it on the web that you alluded to? Technical or political? Yes. I mean, Rue at Stornoway, he says you should just share this, just share it far and wide. I think the interface is still a bit problematic, just to kind of put it out there. We want to user test it, but I'm also being quite precious because Paul knows, had similar problems with Wendy James's work in the Sudan, which were political. She was very wary about putting stuff out there in a very volatile political scenario. And I am worried, well, not worried, but I'm just concerned that if you just provide a link, when I first showed this project to 7net, the first response was, there you go, they're complaining again. That's all they ever do, complain. I've kind of given up with this community. I go to Lawrence Weston, where there's much more vision, with Mark Pepper. And that was the initial starting point. But I said, but this shows people in a, better light. When I showed it to the community, Carol, one of the long-time residents, she said, oh, I sound really intelligent. She was really pleased with how she came across. So I just assumed that would come across to others, but it didn't, because people start with their own positions, and these tools can entrench positions as much as they can bring people together. So I feel at the moment it's a proof of concept in workshop situations where we're there, we're curating it, we're carefully creating that atmosphere for generative listening. But I mean, it's the big question, because 7Net have said, this project will be shared far and wide in the fullness of time. So they've put it out there, and we've kind of, but what do we share and how do we share it? Do we share a subset? That's the big question, and we have to resolve that for the LPIP work with Alan MacLeod to make the toolkit. So that's what we're working on. So yeah, we can have a conversation, Paul, because you know all about this. You've been there before. But I find myself in Wendy's shoes as kind of a bit of the gatekeeper. She was the gatekeeper for the Sudan work, which had its issues. So I'm aware of that, and yeah, that's the next stage really, because it should be shared and it should be available, but it's got to be available in the right form. Because if it ends up creating more polarization, it's doing the opposite of what it's intended to do, and I don't want that to happen. Shall I have a look at the chat? Joe? Oh, nice to say. Well, yes, so I'm a associate member of the Centre for Environment, Society and Resilience. So it's finding lots of resonances across the university, which is really exciting. I can't see any more questions in the chat.
Anybody, anything they want to chip in with? We're coming close to 2 o'clock. We've got time for one or two more. Mandy.
Well, thanks so much, Judith, for a fantastic presentation. And it's just such an interesting project. And each time I hear you talk about it, it brings different thoughts up and different things to mind. I was thinking about the moment when you said that people hadn't wanted to play a part in making the content. They said we've got lots to say. But you can think about how to reflect that. But I started thinking as well about that business of you talking about how you negotiate those different positions between community and industrial interests, business interests. And I'm thinking, have you got a structure in place for the relationship of people to the project? Like, did people have some explicit call over what was included or what wasn't included? Do you have, or have you kept that quite loose, or have you kind of put some structure in around people's editorial control or not over the material and the way it's used?
Well, I mean, we obviously had ethics, and one of the things with ethics was that we wouldn't show anything without showing it to participants first. So we've had ongoing conversations with participants, and we said, these are the clips we're thinking of using. What do you think? And like Carol said, I feel I sound really intelligent. Emma in the food bank she said, if I say the word just again, I'm going to scream. But yes, okay, I'm happy with what you're, what you've selected. So I mean, we didn't, just with the money and the amount of time, we didn't have time to kind of literally go through everything with everybody, but we selected clips, we showed them, we said, well, you could have this clip or this clip, and so everything was vetted and approved by them first. And then when we showed it, we said, if you change your mind, then because there's quite a lot of clips, there's a lot of options. So it's quite fluid. It's not like we've made a really carefully crafted linear piece where the whole thing would fall flat, although these are quite carefully chosen. And 7Net, they're doing some work around skills, and they're doing a 7Net Explorer, and they're saying, how do you get such compelling content? Because Karen Mandy is very rigorous with her filmmaking, and so we all did the filming, but she kind of trained us up and was very, getting the eye line right and getting the positioning and getting stuff that was watchable. And I mean, the sound isn't always brilliant, but it's fine for these purposes. Yeah, but then going forwards, the co-creation, that's an open question really about next steps. I mean, in a way, the first step is to write this up and to get the toolkit of what we've done so far, but then think about what to do next. And there's a number of possibilities thinking about that, and there's a happy Avonmouth Day coming up with the school, with the primary school. There's possibilities to collaborate with the younger children. There's lots of possibilities, and we're still, I mean, we only did the workshop in October and the business breakfast was December, and I've had a lot of teaching, so still kind of processing it really. So I'm sure I'll come round for a glass of wine, Mandy, to pick your brains, because
Yeah,
you know
let's
a
talk
lot
about it
about
more.
this.
And it kind of resonates. I mean, I was thinking about, going back to the 60s and the FOGO process and that kind of, you don't tend to talk so much about that community media history, but, it takes forward some strands from there or reinvents them in ways that are really interesting. So,
well, another thing is I'm examining Kat Cisek's PhD in a month's time. So again, that's getting, and Liz Miller. We know, we've got some fantastic documentary colleagues and Dorrit Narman, around the world, haven't we? With, we've got real shared expertise and been so busy on the ground doing this that I'm looking forward to taking this back to our colleagues around the world and having those conversations about what next. So not just within the local community, but also within our documentary non-extractive processes community. So
thank you.
All to play for.
See you soon. Glass of wine.
Need about 3 of us, don't we, always, with these projects?
We do. Judith, we're dead on 2 o'clock. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was really fascinating, really interesting. I think it just falls on me to thank everybody for making the time this lunchtime. There will be more of these sessions. We have certainly one before the end of the academic year, which feels ages away now, but we'll figure out programming and we'll announce that as soon as we have anything. Thank you all.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Very good. I'm just going to read the what's in the chat.